has more or less been made as clear as it's ever going to get.
Contact 1. A note from Central. Current communications have been inhibited by the sudden relocation effort. Because of this, Cicada has been enacted. Your task still remains the same. To continue our previous conversation, the Pangean servers are still nearly impossible to bypass, and our best efforts to extract information have been randomized and limited. It's no surprise that in spite of that, our progression into the network has surpassed all expectations. Naturally, we will not be satisfied with just this, but we will take advantage of it for now. Now, currently, only the Alpha site can navigate the surface of the Pangean network. But, thanks to our work, we can now randomly extract fragments of information, from partial documents to full-blown images from nearly anywhere inside the Antarctic Circle.
C1, hey, I've been wondering about these set of images. Feels kinda obvious now, but I think I found a group of related files. Pretty sure we're still missing a lot, but I'll drop them in the chat. Take a look.
1300 hours, the capital lander was sighted in flames plummeting to the planet's core. At 1350 hours, the city of Redacted was bombarded and 2/3 of the population were lost. Finally, at 1500 hours, gas turned to stone and stars became glass.
Alright, settle down. Everyone take a look at the board. In my opinion, this is by far one of the oddest locations. So a little historical note, up until the last few months we had always assumed that, like our world, other than the odd change, by natural terraforming, basically everyday things like the weather and earthquakes, then paranormal locations would, roughly, maintain the same general behavior as Earth. That was until this location, CF Local-2029, originally a habitable gas giant with a race of intelligent beings which sailed their world with enormous steam-powered ships. Sounds amazing, right? Well, sorry, they're completely gone. Just poof, all traces of their civilization completely and utterly gone. Replaced with a single rusted abandoned ship and 3 giant eggs, of untraceable and unknown origins. A completely bizarre situation for sure, and while it needs to be said fairly, that other locals and dimensions can present outright unexplainable situations, CF 2029 was by no regard such a place. Every aspect of the place following the same universal laws that can be applied to our world. After an investigation by the Constance Foundation into the whereabouts of the population, a collaboratory effort of agents of the central governance of Pangaea discovered that the eggs were just in fact simple potatoes and not in fact eggs. Madness doesn't end there. After a week of those findings, the team in charge of the surveillance over the giant potatoes and the continued search for the missing inhabitants noticed fluid coming out of all the potatoes. Upon investigation, it was found that the exact location where the previous team had taken samples from had started to leak egg yolk. Obviously by now the hole had gotten much bigger due to the extreme amount of liquid gushing out from the bottom, but the entire structure had changed materials, from being mushy potato to now being a hard, now empty shell of an egg. On top of that, one of the pilots on surveillance in an F-22 at the time sent out a report claiming the sightings of a flying Komodo dragon waving at him. Now all that was a week after the disappearance, and up till then they had been working on another assumption that perhaps all of this was, how to say it, some weird tragedy, that perhaps something crazy had occurred that, although extremely bizarre, was still somehow physical. You know, some experiments gone wrong. Maybe a giant creature had devoured the inhabitants, laid its eggs nearby, something crazy like that. Basically really weird but still somehow logical in a way. But then the collapse happened. 2 days after the findings and odd reports, all the agents in CF 2029 started reporting. Well, more like screaming about angels and a man warning them to leave. A total of 35 agents, as far as we can tell, lost their lives. Now let me make it clear. We are not sure at all of exactly what happened. This is still technically an ongoing situation. But the entire location went dark, literally dark. Now, every time we return to the location we have to wear spacesuits.
Agenda Item 89. Interplanetary Assembly Security Council 105.0-307. General Report from the Ambassador of Truga. Without reference to a main committee, vocal written log. Stephen W. Hallbrook, Ambassador of Truga, sat down with. Redacted preceding the disappearance of Truga and his attempt to conduct a rescue with cooperation of the Constance Foundation for a narration of events. September 17, 2003. Hello. My name is Stephen W. Hallbrook and I serve as an ambassador of my home world, Truga, or as your people prefer to call its capital, Laputa City of the Sky. Well, to begin, 1 month ago I was alerted to a situation on my world. 2 messages were sent from my home planet. One of this was a radio communication directly coming from my people. After demanding to have access to the message, I was horrified by what I heard. Whoever had attempted to communicate had obviously failed, as they were heard immediately screaming into the microphone. It didn't really take long for the screaming to stop, as the sudden sound of a window chattering revealed to me a far more horrid realization. Pure, apocalyptical screaming. Hundreds if not millions of people in agony, as the pure sound of destruction echoed across the presumably empty room. The message ended with a sudden and abrupt cut. The ambassador can be seen on footage taking a short pause to readjust himself. Sorry about that. At Hemwell, according to the CF officers who revealed this message to me around an hour after receiving this message, the congregation sent out a scouting party armed to the teeth only to find a calming, still world with no signs of anything but an empty sky. I saw some of the images they brought back, and all I could think was, how could a world so hectic with daily life and oceans of clouds be replaced with a motionless sky? Eventually they told me about the 3 absurd eggs, really, that just left us with nothing but confusion for a week. Searches and investigations led to nothing. My home had completely disappeared. All the coordinates I knew by heart were empty. Of course, theories were thrown left and right, but there was just nothing we could find, and nothing made sense or have any use or gave us any leads. Sure enough, before we could even begin to comprehend what had happened, the gate, or aberration as you guys call it, suddenly shut down. So not only were my people gone, but now a total of 35 of your people were stranded on the other side. Many likely to run out of fuel and end up hailing down to my planet's blazing heart, just like the unknown rusted ship. 2 days after this, your people finally managed to get a connection to the other side again. We decided on a drone, and after sending it, its camera feed went dark. Certainly, it took a bit to figure out, but after confirmation by having the drone look at itself, we realized where it was. An empty, black void. Yeah, this time everything was really gone. I mean, what can I really say with that? A week passed and I truly felt completely lost. I mean, just imagine, one day you're having trouble putting your name down to call back home, the next you're not sure you have a home at all. I didn't even know how to react or what to even do, really. 2 months passed, and I mostly just kept busy looking at the drone footage. I don't think I let the idea sink in for the most part. Then as suddenly as it disappeared, that empty void slowly began to fracture in color. For a while, I had been sitting with the Pangean watch guards, just waiting for that empty black screen to change as the drone kept flying in circles. I swear the instant the first pixel changed, I jumped from my seat screaming at the guard next to me as he called in the members of the Constance Foundation. We all sat as the image fractured like a breaking mirror, like watching a tsunami of gas suddenly fill in with light, a darkened room. What was left of my world suddenly came into view. It's hard to even explain. We watched as suddenly an entire world came into perspective from angles we couldn't even understand. We saw the emptiness of a void light up even brighter than the Milky Way. As time progressed, we began to see buildings completely distinct from any in my world, or for that matter yours. After another week of settlement, my world, in part, looked to return to a vague similarity as before. Yet everything seemingly changed for the worst in a chaotic fashion. As more drones were sent in, we discovered that my world had become a maze. Fractured mirrors of a normal site could send you out hundreds of miles in any direction. To add to this mess, these invisible barriers would tend to change location soon after being touched. Like attempting to walk a fourth-dimensional plane. What looked to be right in front of you could trap you hundreds of miles away into deep space. The entire situation had me baffled personally, but according to your scientists, my universe is Actually, I don't really remember, but for lack of a better term, collapsing. The best they could guess was a total dismantling of all universal laws of physics and basically everything in between. Apparently some of the other drones saw objects suddenly surpassing the speed of light to then just stop without a reason or effect, as if they had never moved. Others saw pockets of time stuck in loops, a rock smashing into another just to revert and do so again. And finally entire planets losing their atomic structure, turning into dust at the lightest touch, yet still remaining with life of equal density. To be honest, I felt more and more hopeless as the drones gave us even more information. I imagined nothing could ever possibly survive for long in such a place. Though now looking back on it, I had overheard from one of the CF operators that even if the laws were no more, they didn't seem to have been replaced with something different. Pockets seemed to remain unchanged while others were drastically altered for whatever reason. Regardless, I didn't really care at the time. Truth is, I had been clenching my teeth for nearly more than 2 months, just to see this in return. Needless to say, after taking everything in for a day, I nearly gave in to despair. Nothing really made any sense to me, and everything just looked so chaotic. But like that old tale of the moonlight crow, hope tends to be a clingy thing. So of course, while I was on the brink of despair, something changed. Like before, cities I had never seen began to be caught in sight, and shortly after the congregation intercepted radio chatter from one of the missing squads. People were still alive. Even more importantly, that specific squad was in the city the day of the disappearance. Unfortunately, they were completely lost and the congregation could only listen as they spoke to each other. Not much was gathered from their conversation other than the general sentiment that the soldiers were lost for the moment. Then one of the soldiers was heard saying, "I found it. This way to the city, guys," as he pointed to an empty space on the road they'd been walking. The soldier took a few steps and, in full confidence, jumped in the middle of the road and disappeared as the transmission was once again cut off short. It wasn't much, but that was enough for me. Immediately, without a second thought, I summoned for an emergency gathering of the Pangean congregation to seriously propose a rescue operation. 8 hours later, I pleaded my case to the Interplanetary Assembly, yet because of my haste and unpreparedness, many were left unconvinced. Too many were simply unwilling to place their people in such a potentially inescapable situation. After being battered for 2 hours, the meeting nearly settled to begin a vote, my arguments now beginning to fall on deaf ears. The room suddenly silent. The darkening of the room became known, yet the lights themselves remained the same, as every entity within this hall became devoid of expression. A single man stepped past me in a pitch-black suit with a long, thin cape. His helmet was round, upright sharp horns, mirroring the likeness of Anubis himself. As he stepped into the assembly's central stage as it lifted, he was known only as the Speaker of the Constance Foundation. He looked towards the crowd of ambassadors from the solitary pillar, and the entire Interplanetary Assembly suddenly felt as if they had made it clear he had their full acknowledgement and recognition without question. Regardless, he presented himself to the Senate on behalf of the Constance Foundation, proposing to a separate deal for the occasion. They would grant support for the matter themselves as an independent group, so long as they would be granted use of congressional aberrations. In addition, the Senate would receive a favor from the Constance Foundation directly. Unfortunately, as the Senate began to respond, I was escorted out of the Grand Hall. The discussion ran for nearly an hour, but whatever decision had been taken, it had arrived in my favor. The Foundation was willing to support my efforts to rescue whatever was left of my world alongside the 35 members of the congregation. Shortly after they presented me with a plan, 2 teams of 4 would enter the aberration and attempt the rescue. Both Abe 1 and Abe 2 would be equipped with 2 mobile rocket missile satellites and 2 communication antennas, alongside basic standard equipment. Abe 2 would be sent out by ship, while Abe 1, mine, would be sent out on foot using specialized CF suits. We also had what they called a smart device capable of communicating back to Earth Prime, and capable of establishing an aberration 15 feet in front of the device. Apparently, this is what it took to save my people. We would be the ones to give them a door towards safety. Hell, I'll admit it, at the time I was impressed. I felt like a total novice as I looked at all the Foundation soldiers getting prepared and laying out everything in front of me. But of course, I am not that inexperienced. Unlike them, I had everything to lose, so I couldn't exactly let them show me up. Once everything was finally ready to go, we went ahead to Nebraska. As soon as we got there, we watched as an Antonov 3-26, a space-capable version of the Antonov 1-24, got ready to launch from the underground base. The aberration in question opened to a size I had never seen before, as it screeched, leaving everyone more than unsettled. One of the soldiers jokingly saying that it never got easier with the big ones. And honestly, it was fucking terrifying. The gate then began to close as it shrank oddly, closing completely. After them, it was our turn, and so the green light was given and we stepped inside the hangar and queued up for the jump. This was the second time I'd ever jumped through the gate. Fucking seriously. The ambassador was interrupted by redacted to correct his use of words. Alright, fine, the aberration. Anyway, getting back to the story, besides the horrifying sensation that thing gives you, this time things were different. The fear was justified. The fact was that I could die the very instant I popped out on the other side. But I was doing this for more than my people, something that to me had more worth and importance than the congregation or the Foundation themselves, even more important than my own government. And so it was that I jumped first. I realize I tend to overuse this metaphor, but perhaps to me this is the nature of the universe. Because once again, like so many times before, I saw broken mirrors of innumerable sights, likely memories of 1,000 worlds. Colors moved in every direction as my body felt perfectly still. Yet I knew in my mind that I was moving, perhaps even trillions of light years, as even through my suit the air and my cheeks turned to ice in my face. Then, suddenly, I was there.
Document interruption.
I knew from the beginning that anything could go wrong, but for a moment I remembered.
Document interruption.
Something important, something I had hidden from the congregation and even the Foundation.
Document interruption.
Not even my own government. I had a very beautiful wife. Document interruption. Please refer to the following document. Agenda Item 89, Interplanetary Assembly Security Council 202.9-308. General Report from the Ambassador of Truga Part 2. Without reference to Main Committee, Vocal Written Log. After the previous sitting with the Ambassador of Truga, he requested to leave for fresh air. After 10 minutes, he returned to continue giving his report. The congregation makes no attempt to question the ambassador over the previously revealed information. Alright, so when I jumped into the gate and finally landed on the other side, I had to take a moment to really come to grips with my visions, and that strange appearance of my wife. I ended up in space feeling disorientated as hell, feeling my weightlessness. As I felt that distinct bump of total stillness around me, the ice in my cheeks began to dissipate. As I took in my surroundings, I was shocked by the outstanding sight. I quickly pulled out the smart device to establish a connection back to Earth as a nagging question began to spin in my head. Yet as I stretched out my arm to look at the holographic screen, I heard the all-too-familiar screech. The sudden fear of having a needle loom over my eyes ran through my body like a near crash. I stupidly looked and felt for an instant a sense of relief as I saw nothing. It was only then that I remembered and realized the danger I now again felt coming, with no time to react. It was already too late. Purely through my sense of touch did I feel as if I had just gone through a window and the shattered glass broke all around me. I knew then that my fractured universe had devoured me and had immediately began to digest, as it teleported me seemingly randomly across the universe. In every instance I could have sworn I had died violently. By what laws did I survive, I still wonder about. Because I felt as if a pipe had gone through my chest, and I stood inches away from the eye of a world-eating serpent who then ate me in a moment, only to then suddenly get launched into space so fast that I spinned out of control to the point that I felt my arms and legs were going to be ripped from me. But just as my mind and stomach were driven to their limits, the fractures teleported me into an empty void of pure white. To say the place was heavenly is an understatement. All the pain and damage I had just experienced, and even the panic of such a hectic moment, had suddenly disappeared. My mind then somehow reached a perfect understanding that I now fail to even imagine, as if I was drugged and now had some new awareness. Still, that feeling now seems so far, like my mind is somehow rejecting such an amazing feeling, refusing to believe it actually happened. Still, at the time, it made me incredibly certain of what I needed to do. That said, now it's almost hard to believe I was actually in control, but I feel certain that I was. It was a purpose driven by resolved and absolute instinct alone. For a moment that place had changed something in me. As I laid on that blinding light, the very nature of the fractures became clear, as if it were as simple as jumping from one wall to another to go up. The simplicity of my movement was tireless, and I felt like an athlete in his prime, using the fractures to return to my planet. Whatever this space was, it took nothing from me and only boosted all that I was, and like a catapult that was drawn back, I was launched back into familiar space as I free-dived into the orbit of my planet without a care. As I reached terminal velocity, I regained my natural senses and began to panic. Yet as I fell, I was given a reminder of my universe's absurdity, as a cloud of what felt like an infinite depth with the properties of styrofoam saved me from certain death. As I continued to fall slowly, I pierced the cloud, leading to another fracture, moving me nearly 30 feet from solid ground. As my feet impacted the ground, the lower half of my body gave way, prompting my suit to take action. Programmed for such things, the exoskeleton protected my legs as it simultaneously took the force of my landing by punching into the ground as I landed, visibly cracking the ground. I just sat there, kneeled in that position for God knows how long, as my brain attempted to understand and process everything I had just gone through in the span of what were probably just a couple of minutes. Eventually, I simply fell over on my side as I remembered to breathe. And as for my body, well, I'm not. I just really can't even remember. That being said, shortly after I finally stood up from the ground and decided to check my smart device, feeling a bit paranoid I had lost it. By some miracle I had managed to hold onto the thing, so I attempted to communicate back with the Constance Foundation. Luckily, they picked up, so I instructed them not to send the other members of my team, but you know how they are. They simply asked me how I managed to survive, and after explaining what I could remember, even describing the moment, they simply responded to me with a hold for a moment. As I stood there waiting for a reply, not 5 minutes had gone by before two of them landed in the same way I did, as another simply opened an aberration to get to me, probably that being the smarter choice. After some awkward stares, she responded by saying the Foundation had only managed to connect properly after they had jumped. One of the guys ended up as fucked as I was, and after some complaining by the other, who somehow landed perfectly without a care, I simply let them be, as I reported their safe arrival to command. They then instructed me to proceed with the mission and locate the capital, to which I responded when an inquiry about the status of the second team that left by ship. Apparently, they had not been as lucky. Their ship had gotten stuck in space. They weren't too far from the planet, but they were now surrounded by invisible sticky material. They seemed confident in being able to escape, but it would take them some time, so unfortunately, they wouldn't be much help for the time being. With the good news that at least everyone had survived, we took a good look at the surrounding as Miss Trooper launched one of the mobile rocket satellites. According to her, we were on a massive floating island that again, for lack of a better term, was simply bugging out, like an object that had forgotten to fall in a video game. It was simply not falling. Currently, without anything else being said, everyone just looked at each other equally uncomfortable with that information, as we all looked up and saw a tiny pebble fall to the ground. With that, we simply began running to the last coordinates of Truga. We finally started giving our exoskeletons the proper use and practically sprint jumped our way to the edge of the floating island. Still, the capital was 50 miles away from our location on the edge of the island. And yes, that's where it finally hit me, where I realized what that nagging question in the back of my head was. How exactly were we supposed to navigate a gas giant on foot? I had been so fixated on saving my people that the thought hadn't even crossed my mind. I lost my shit as I realized this wasn't going to be like last time. I was so accustomed to always having a ship or just being on one of the cities that I had completely forgotten, and trying to get answers from the Foundation over such a stupid idea like going on foot on a gas giant was like trying to pull out teeth, as the others simply remained quiet, trying not to look at me as I continued to batter the operator, probably trying to shift the blame to her. But before I could actually start to get angry or got any answers, two men came from behind us out of nowhere. I instantly recognized them as a couple that used to run a local bar close to the Capitol, usually a favorite of most congressmen, including myself. Still, though, they seemed exhausted as one of them reached me while the other dragged behind him trying to catch up. As I spoke his name, he recognized my voice with a tired smile on his face, yet suddenly, before he could actually react, the guy behind him suddenly screamed as drops of blood impacted my helmet even from that distance. Trooper screamed to jump, and the rest of my squad acted fast, grabbing us both from behind and throwing us off the edge alongside them. The other man had been obliterated by one of the fractures, which seemed to behave like a shredder. As I fell, I felt that looming fear gripped me again, feeling sure of that imminent boiling death at the center of my planet. But then I saw as Johnny, the man who got dragged alongside us, desperately fiddled with a tiny object as tears ran across his face. 2029-309. At this point, the ambassador was interrupted by Agent Redacted as he excused himself and proceeded to respond to a call by the Grand General. The ambassador is seen giving an okay and standing up as he places one hand in his pocket and begins smoking with the other. The footage beyond this point is cut out until 20 minutes later. Document interruption. Please refer to the following document.
Hey Phantom, I really don't get this. According to the report, they went in on foot. I mean, that just doesn't make sense. It isn't like the Foundation to just miss the mark on something like this. They may be laid back at times or a bit too gung-ho, even vague as hell, but they're not really this stupid. Usually they're meticulous, so what the hell happened there?
I'm not too sure, we need more information. But hey, you gotta remember the Foundation is a bit different from the other organizations. While they are a group made by humans, for humans, they aren't exactly controlled by humans according to our information. You get what I'm saying?
So aliens is what you're saying, right?
No, dumbass. You know you should really read Cumley's reports.
Severely corrupted file. Attempting transcription.
Failed. Attempting partial recovery. Failed. Corrupted file. Attempting partial trim 1 hours, 56 minutes and 35 seconds to 1 hours, 57 minutes and 47 seconds.
Sir, we had the AI analyzing the missing drone footage. We noted something strange. All 4 members of A1 can be seen on the blank void, and that's impossible. I just checked, and only the ambassador has taken the aberration.
That isn't really strange. That section of space is outside the influence of time. Maybe another timeline went ahead early, or we're just watching our own guys early. That being said, what is strange is, well, Trooper. She's supposed to use the aberration to skip this mess, yet she's there. Though, there isn't any distortion around her, that is. Definitely weird. Pass on the info to the Quantumate lab. They might know what's going on.
Agenda Item 89, Interplanetary Assembly Security Council 202.9-309. General Report from the Ambassador of Truga Part 3, without reference to Main Committee, Vocal Written Log. After Redacted was requested to answer a call by the Grand General, the discussion would be paused for 20 minutes. During this break, the Ambassador of Truga took a moment to smoke. During the following conversation, the Ambassador can be seen fiddling with something in his pocket.
Do document. Intent interrupt. Inter up to on. Document. Document interruption. Please, wait moment.
Agenda Item 90, Interplanetary Assembly Security Council. General Report from Major Finley O'Brien, Commander of the Specialized Forces of AB-2. Without reference to Main Committee, Vocal Written Log. 2029-309. Finley O'Brien was requested to give a vocal testimony of the event pertaining to the special rescue operation on the collapsing local of Truga, otherwise known as CF-Local-2029. Can we please hurry this up? They're serving tacos on the mess hall. That shit only happens like once a year, you realize that, right?
Redacted. No need to worry, Major Finley. This shouldn't take long, just drive us through what happened and I'll even make Redacted over here bring you one.
Deal. Where do you want me to start?
Really, I want you to start from the beginning. But how about we skip that part and you begin just after you pass through the aberration?
Well, just after we passed the aberration, we flew for probably less than 2 minutes before we got stuck on that plasmatic sticky stuff Vinny was so interested on. I didn't really get what it was, but something needed to be done about it. We got suited up and took a closer look. Taking some samples, we were left only going by the texture since the material was transparent. If I had to say what it felt like, it was something between bubble gum and oil. But what was really weird about it was the fact it didn't seem to leave any residue behind, which surprised me. For sure it was hard to get off, no question, but you could peel it off altogether like fucking shaving slime, and yet it also seemed to move on its own. Anyway, the question still remained how to get out of it, so in the end I just told the guys to request extra fuel through the aberration and to just floor it until we got freed or the wings came off. We made it, so it worked out, but we did kinda lose some metal panels from the bottom of the plane and at least one of the covers for the wheels. Sorry about that one, by the way. Anyway, the damage wasn't really critical and we got out in like 10-20 minutes, so we moved ahead to the location no problem. Now, according to the info we were given, some of our guys were spotted on one of the roads leading out of the mystery cities that kept appearing from thin air. So our orders from command were to simply follow whatever clues we could find and try to get in contact with them. I thought we were going to meet up with AB-1, but command told us to just follow up on this. I don't know why. At any rate, on the way to the area they were last seen, we just kept blasting every type of signal we could think of to see if anybody picked up. And yeah, we couldn't get in contact with anyone. Though thinking back, actually, we did pick up this one odd ring, or maybe it was more like a short melody. Not sure, but it sounded like a ringtone, at worst maybe an alarm. I think it played twice and then never again. We did get the recording, but it sounded like a bip 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 ping. I don't know, man. It was coming from every direction at the same time, and it was such a short burst that we couldn't determine anything about it, so we just kept going to the mystery cities. As we got closer, we started to notice movement inside some of the buildings on the edge of the city just before the road kept going past the horizon. Getting closer, we realized the road looked more like a bridge with fog or maybe dust beneath it. The buildings on the edge were strange to say the least. Really, I can't even give you a reference to them. You're just gonna have to see them for yourself. Anyway, the space around the area was so anomalous that it was easy enough to get on what was basically a floating island in space. We left a couple of the guys on the plane as it just floated there. Then me and Vinny jumped down to explore the area. We were still technically in space, so moving was a bit difficult, but there seemed to be enough gravity to pull us down to the ground. As we landed, we noticed the same movement around some of the buildings. Feeling a bit paranoid as we tried to get in, Vinny decided to remind me of the wackiness of this universe by telling me the door could possibly disintegrate as we walked in. I told him to shut the fuck up and went inside, only to get the absolute living shit out of me, scared by what was basically a 7 feet tall, half octopus, half hammerhead shark person thing look at me straight in the eyes. Yeah, I know, and look man, that's just what it looked like. It was half octopus, half shark, and I only noticed later that it wasn't even touching the ground, instead using a rock to simply hover around everywhere. I don't know how that works, dude. Ask the guys from the lab, not me. Anyway, it scared the shit out of me, so I nearly shot it. But Vinny, being the mad lad peacekeeper he is, stepped in front of me trying to talk with it. Surprisingly, as Vinny took the step and I lowered my gun, the creature suddenly hid behind one of the pillars in the room. Vinny then raised his hands, looking up at the creature's head and triangular mouth with sharp teeth as it peeked from the top side of the pillar. Honestly, for a creature so Cthulhian in appearance, I got the sense it was rather skittish. The creature had yet to really speak, so I doubted it actually understood what he was saying. But Vinny still attempted to look non-threatening and began approaching the creature, lowering his arms to the height of his shoulders. He attempted a couple of gestures to get it to speak so our translators and our hemets could decipher his language, but to me the creature just seemed to look at him blankly as if he was actually speaking to a shark out of water. Eventually the creature began making a sound, and it was loud. If not for its expression and subtle movement away from the pillar towards Vinny, I would have thought it was a scream. But our translators converted the odd sound of what I can only describe like the mixture of a dinosaur and a bird into comprehensible sound.
He told us to approach you,
the creature said as our translators had barely caught up.
I am sorry, we could only manage to understand you just now as our translators are rather slow. Please know that we mean you no harm, you just scared us a bit. Please say it again. Who told you to approach us?
Said Vinny, lowering his hand and finally crossing his arms. The creature, as far as I could tell, seemed to relax a bit and repeated what it said.
Hey, a creature like you told us its name, Kennedy. He told us to approach you carefully and ask for help.
Vinny looked at me, wondering if I knew the name. And yeah, I knew the guy. He was in the report. He was the guy that jumped and disappeared in the original footage after the collapse. After giving him a nod, Vinny continued to ask questions and reassure the creature that we were friendly. To make it short, the creature was obviously from another world. According to it, his world suffered a cataclysm. Not even he knew for sure what happened exactly, but as a result, many of his cities were ripped from the ground of his planet and consumed by a darkness until just a few months ago. Their cities floated on a dark, empty void for what they assume were years. During this period of time, they had constructed bridges and roads over vast voids of emptiness in an attempt to continue surviving regardless of the situation. But a month ago, they were suddenly hit with a similar catastrophe and ended up in this universe. Their people were now few and desperate, suffering from starvation from the long periods in voidless locations. They only survived because they had entire cities worth of resources and replicators. But taking a closer look at the surroundings and the dry skin of the creature itself, I could tell it was definitely not easy for them. Vinny and I looked at each other, and without a word, we knew what needed to be done. As the leading members of the congregation, the Constance Foundation would unquestionably help them. But still, before doing that, we needed to know. Tell us, where did Kennedy go? Document interruption. Please refer to the following document.